Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1987 sequel, Teen Wolf 2. Now, I am not going to stand firmly in this film's corner. This film is not good. It's a lame movie and a lame sequel. That being said, I've seen much worse. I don't think it's one of the worst sequels I've ever seen, let alone one of the worst films of the 80s. Like, I've seen lists include this film in. I don't think it's that bad. And I guess part of that might be because I do have nostalgia for this film because I grew up with it on VHS along with the first movie. So when I watch this film, I do get some of those fuzzy nostalgia uh, feels. I do get a little bit of that, the nostalgia effect. That being said, it's not anywhere near close to being as good as the first movie, and the first movie isn't that great to begin with. And it really does play out like a cheap cash grab. Like, they didn't really put that much effort into it, bare minimum type of stuff. But it still has a bit of that 80s charm, and there are things about it, including the cast as well as the soundtrack, that actually aren't that bad. So it's one of those things where, yeah, it's a bad sequel and a relatively bad movie that at best is below average, but it's still tolerable. Like, it's not nonstop cringe. There's some cringe in this. There's some stuff in this film that is some of the most cringe inducing shit I think I've seen in a long time, but that's only a small portion of it, and the rest of it is relatively harmless and watchable. So it's like one of those things where it's not a rant because it doesn't piss me off. It's not like it twists my ass hairs. It's not one of those movies. It's like, yeah, it's bad, but eh, you know, I'm not gonna say that I had an incredibly painful experience watching Teen Wolf 2. Now, the film is directed by Christopher Leitch, and this is a guy who directed a bunch of TV shows and stuff like that before he was given the job for this movie. I'm wondering if the folks at Atlantic thought that they could capture the same success that they had with Rod Daniel, who directed the first movie, and that's why they got Christopher, or maybe they got Christopher because they couldn't find anyone else who was willing to direct this movie. So they found this young up and coming director who was hungry for a job, and they were like, "Here, do you want Teen Wolf 2? It's a chance to direct a movie." And Christopher was like, "Yeah, I definitely want to direct Teen Wolf 2." And you could see some of the enthusiasm for the project behind the camera, but the talent level isn't really there yet for Christopher. And what you have is a very below average directorial effort that makes Rod Daniels' workmanlike job in the first movie look like an absolute masterwork in comparison. Like, Rod Daniels' direction in the first Teen Wolf looks like he directed a multi-million-dollar production in comparison to what Christopher does here with his lens and with his skills behind the camera. Because this film just looks so cheap. It looks so bad on so many different levels, from the lighting, from the way that scenes are structured and shot. There's not much variety at all when it comes to the camera techniques, or, zooms or pans or angles or anything like that. I would say the best looking scenes that have any real amount of energy that is palpable is the dance number scene, but I think that's more just because there's all these people moving around and the dancers are doing stuff, and they're providing the energy, not the director. The boxing scenes are miserable. They just look flat. They look bad. They look pathetic. And honestly, there's not much you can do with a werewolf boxing anyway. Like with Teen Wolf, basketball is a more interesting, unique kind of sport where you can do behind the back passes and you can have slam dunks, and there's these sort of things you can do with the sport with this guy in a wolf suit that can be somewhat fun to watch. Like he can dribble it, be like he's a Harlem Globetrotter, that kind of stuff. Boxing, like there's nothing you can really do, and so you just have this guy who's in a fursuit just punching people really hard, and you have the typical like, oh, punches one guy out of the ring, but like there's just you're just so limited, and it just takes something that was already a ridiculous, ludicrous concept and just makes it even more laughable and just hard to take seriously. And there's a lot of other shots in the film they just like they look like a cheap music video. And then you have the scene where Jason Bateman's Teen Wolf catches a frisbee in slow motion. And that is one of the most cringe scenes in all of cinema. And like what can any director do with that? I mean, that idea in itself is just a no-go. It's never going to work. So in some ways I kind of feel bad for Christopher because like what was he going to do with that scene? Nobody can make that scene work, including like Stanley Kubrick brought back from the dead. So it's just one of those movies where whoever was saddled with this film as a director, they were just doomed to fail. So I'm not gonna be too hard on Christopher, but at the same time, the direction is not very good. It really isn't. There's a reason why he wasn't asked to direct a lot of feature films after this, because he just didn't really show that he was up to the task. I mean, even the comedy bits, they're just not funny most of the time because of the way that they're shot. They just are tired. They don't have the same comedic timing or energy as Rod Daniels' direction in the first or other comedy films had around that time. And yeah, it's just not a well-directed movie. But what's crazy is Christopher would go on to have success in a different way later on in his career as a writer, because he went on to write Universal Soldier, which I find to be just absolutely insane, that the guy who directed Teen Wolf 2 went on to write one of Jean-Claude Van Damme's best films. Now, speaking of writing, the screenplay is written by R. Timothy Kring, and I think this might have been kind of a pseudonym because then later on he just went by Tim Kring, and this is the same guy who went on to write Heroes, the hit television show, among other popular, well-renowned, well-received TV shows. So it's another one of those things where, well, you got to start somewhere. And where he starts is just at a pretty damn low point. Like, this is not a good script. This is a very lazy hack job in a lot of ways. It just copy and pastes numerous different elements and aspects from the first film just right into this sequel, with little variation. And it doesn't help that you're bringing back Styles and Chubb, but you don't have Michael J. Fox, and you don't even have Jerry Levine, who played Styles. You have a different actor playing Styles. So it just has this whole very just lazy, hacky feel to it, because it's just one of those things where like this just feels like a great value bargain bin version of Teen Wolf, which Teen Wolf was already a bargain bin movie to begin with in terms of the fact that it was shot in 21 days with a very low budget. And I will give the script some credit, though. I think it does have some differences, some changes, some aspects that I think are decent. Like, I feel that having Todd be the lead, having it be Scott's cousin, is a better move than just having some other guy play Scott. And I like that Todd is different than Scott. He's not just the same character. Although they do have similarities because he's shy and doesn't have a lot of self confidence. But I like the differences in terms of the way things are written with him getting bullied. That's a different take because once he's a werewolf, he's not immediately the big popular guy on campus. He's actually bullied by people on campus initially until he wins a boxing match, and now all of a sudden they're doing dance numbers and they love him. And he's even, singing the song, "Do You Love Me?" And everyone loves this werewolf who boxes on the college team. And I like that this script does a better job showing why being the wolf was a bad thing, because he genuinely becomes a jerk. Like in Teen Wolf, Scott wasn't really enough of a jerk as the wolf to really make that stick in terms of him stopping being the wolf. There was a few things that he was, doing that, were a little jerky, but like Todd in this, when he's in wolf mode, once he's popular and he's getting the good grades and he's getting the girls and he's getting all the fame, he's a total dick. Like he's a dick nose. And I think that was a missed opportunity to have a callback to Styles' shirts in the first Teen Wolf. To have like, instead of the scene where Styles is like, "You're a jerk," like you just be like, "You're an obnoxious dick nose." But that would take some clever writing, and I don't know if the writer at this time was capable of that. But I do like that. I do feel that the script does a much better job when it comes to showing Todd as the wolf being a jerk and having it be a negative and not just all mostly a positive for him. And I do like some of the differences that the script has when it comes to the villains, specifically Dean Dunn. I think Dean Dunn is definitely a more interesting or fun character than Thorne, who's just this wimpy vice principal who pissed his pants when Scott's dad confronted him years ago. So then when Scott's dad confronts him again, it's just one of those, "Oh, well, we already know this happened before," so it just feels repetitive. But in this, when Brooks confronts him later in the film and tells him to leave Todd alone, like that actually is a more effective bit of writing because there's more there. Like there's a bigger sense of catharsis or a moment of crowd pleasing. There's a good crowd pleasing moment there where Tanya puts him in his place. The other villain, though, Gus, the boxer, he's just Mick, but with bigger muscles and sunglasses. Like that is literally the same character. So the writing, it's even uneven when it comes to the villains. And it's even uneven when it comes to like the writing of the love interest, but I do like the fact that Nikki is not the same as Boof, and I like the fact that she's closer to Todd in terms of her personality. She's also shy, and she's a bookworm, and she's into science, and I don't I don't mind that aspect of that character, but I think the writer dropped the ball when it comes to making that character likable. She came across as like really needy and just pretty bad and annoying as the story went on, and just really brought to the forefront some really unlikable traits about her, so you didn't really want the two to get together between Todd and Nikki, unlike Scott and Booth in the first film. Also, the script does do a little changes when it comes to the women that are the distractions for Todd, like the girl that was the distraction, or the initial sense or source of attraction for Scott. So it does something different here by having it be two women. So that's that's changing things up a little bit. But a lot of the stuff in the script is just the same beats as the first film, but just not nearly as good. And the comedy is even worse. There's even a fart joke with Chubby that's embarrassing, and the lines from Styles, the new Styles, are just not funny. Styles himself just comes across as just a pale imitation of what Styles was. And you even have like characters like Coach Finstock, and it still doesn't work because this time around you have the same character who hasn't learned anything and isn't different in any capacity and doesn't add anything to the movie or the plot. And you got, Chubby, but it's just the same sort of stuff. And there's also things about the film that just feel like it's tamer. It doesn't have the same edge as the first film does, and it's not like the first film had a significant amount of edge to it. But there were some jokes and there were some moments in the first movie that were just significantly more um, edgy, like the joke about the dick in the vacuum cleaner, or the fact that Scott does the whole thing to get the keg of beer. Here in this script, it's Todd asking to get his schedule changed at college. That doesn't have the same feel, you know. Oh, change my schedule now. Like compared to like give me a keg of beer. Like it just doesn't have the same feel. It just comes across as lame. And even when Todd first transforms, he transforms at this party and is like looking inside of a tuba. Like it's just there's just a lot of stuff that just is so much worse. Even the choice of the sport, like boxing. Boxing? Like it's different, I will give it that, but it might as well just done basketball again or football. Like football made more sense for college. Yeah, it's gonna be hidden behind a helmet and all of that, but you could have worked around that. And football is definitely a much more exciting, innovative sport when it comes to showing the werewolf's abilities. In boxing, like what really is different about a teen wolf boxing compared to Mike Tyson? Not really much of a difference. So just a poor choice of sport. And also, it makes no sense that college boxing is that big of a deal out of college. Like, I can't think of a single college boxing team off the top of my head. It might exist, but it's not like people are watching college boxing on ESPN. Like, it's not that big of a deal, especially to the point where people are gonna freak out at the college boxing team winning. Like, who gives a shit? Like most of the people at the college in real life would be like, "Oh, did you hear the boxing team won this week? We have a boxing team." Like that's really what the real response would be. And like the ending, like the basketball stuff makes more sense because that's a team sport and there's ways that you can win despite lacking ability, that kind of thing. Boxing though, like you got to know how to fight. So when the other fighters win, like Chubb wins a boxing match, and Scott just uses his heart and somehow beats the villain Gus, it just comes across as more fantasy and more just ridiculous than anything else. Like there was a certain sense of realism, despite how much of a fantasy it was, if you really think about it, when it comes to the end of Teen Wolf. But there still was a certain sense of realism with the team playing together and then playing from behind and them winning by 1 point, that kind of thing. Except that, but this Scott going in there against this guy who's like 2 times his size and just gets his ass handed to him for most of the fight, but then just somehow he lands an uppercut. Like, come on now. Like, it's just the whole movie in a lot of ways. It's just like, come on now. Like, give me a break. Like Professor Brooks being a werewolf too. Okay, that's not too bad. Kind of interesting. I wish they could have done more with it. But then you have a scene where she shows her tail, and it's just like, that looks like garbage. So there's a lot of stuff in this that it's just bad. Like there's even shots in the film where I think it's supposed to be Jason Bateman's character in the makeup, in the wolf suit, but it's clearly the stunt double. So it's and that's just something that was, to be fair, that was a problem with the first movie too. But yeah, I mean the romance is not really that compelling or that romantic, and the drama with, oh my god, I didn't study for this one final for this one class. I'm in so much trouble, and oh, you can study, you can do the final, but you also have to box the same day. Um, Leads to a fun montage of Todd studying to a great song, but I mean, still, like, this script is just, it's the pits. It's bad. Like the best things about it are very minor, very minimal. The cast, though, I mean, it's a mixed bag. Like Jason Bateman, in I think his feature film debut, he's actually pretty good. He has a good screen presence. You can see the charisma that you would definitely see showcased later on in his career. He's a young, fresh face at this point, but you can definitely see that this is a guy who works on camera. He's not camera shy. Uh, he's a decent enough actor to make some dumb lines work, or act behind the wolf suit and still show some personality and have some dynamic with the character, especially his transition from shy bookish Todd to just total just asshole jock. The whole scene where he's like, hey Styles, why don't you, me, and the wolf take the car out tonight and go for a little scream. Like, you're just like, god, what a douche. Like, he did a good job playing that transition of that character. So yeah, I think Jason Bateman is definitely a highlight here. Kim Darby, she's pretty solid too, as Tanya Brooks, the professor who's the mentor for Todd. John Astin is a hoot. It's just a lot of fun playing the dean. Uh, One of the only laughs I got from the film is from John Astin, because there's a scene where the tables are turned, and Jason Bateman's character, he's now has the control, and he has, like, he's got the keys to the Ferrari, and he's sitting in the dean's chair, and John has this, he's sitting in the dean's chair and he's petting the dean's dog, who is showcased to be a total monster and unruly at the beginning of the movie. and now he's petting the dog and he's sitting in the dean's chair, and John Astin has this puppy dog look on his face. Like that was funny because John Astin is just a good actor. Paul Sand as Bobby Finstock. I'm not a fan of that character, so he did the best that he could with very little. James Hampton, a good mentor type. I know Todd already had Tanya, but it was still nice to have James Hampton. His uncle Harold. It was fun to see him in the werewolf makeup again. Uh, it was good to have him there because it was one of the only connections you had to Teen Wolf other than like Chubby, the actor who played Chubby, because everyone else was, they were playing the same characters, but it was a different actor. So you didn't have the same sense of familiarity. And Estee Chandler's Nikki, she's fine. Not anything particularly special, but fine. I thought she and Jason Bateman had some decent chemistry at times. I just think the character wasn't very well written, so I'm not going to be too hard on the actress. Stuart Fratkin as Styles, another one of those things. I don't want to be too hard on him because he had very big shoes to fill, and at the same time, he tried to improvise. He tried to do a lot of stuff, but the production studio, the company behind this film, Atlantic, they wouldn't let him do it, and so he just felt very restrained and held back, and that's why I can't really say a whole lot about his styles. Like his styles was energetic, like he had some charisma, but didn't have the memorable scenes, didn't have the memorable lines, just wasn't that funny. So you just didn't really have the same sort of uh overall performance as you got from Styles in the first movie. The guy who played the other villain, Gus, Robert Neary, he's got a good mean mug. He's got no screen presence, no charisma, but he's got a good mean mug. I mean, he looks intimidating when he's standing in the back with his sunglasses on, but when he has to say anything, any lines of dialogue, like a lot of that goes out the window. I mean, even in the boxing matches, he didn't really look that great in the ring. And he looks kind of clumsy. And at the same time, like the guy, when he's fighting, he's just trying way too hard to be Rocky. Like he's just copying Rocky lines. Come on, come on. It's like, come on, my mother hits harder than that. It's like, dude, I did not want to see a frat bro version of Rocky. Come on, dude. Come on, bro. My mother hits harder than that. Hit me. uh, you had Mark Holton. He's back as Chubby. It was a different take on the character, less rowdy. Honestly, a lot less fun. It didn't seem like he was as confident in himself either. I mean, you had a scene where he farted in bed, so it was definitely not really the most, let's just say, flattering or uh, um, good portrayal for that character. Like they didn't go that route. They didn't go the obvious fart joke. Aha, he's fat, so he farts and it's funny route in the first movie. They didn't do that with him. They had the whole bit with the liverwurst, but he turned the tables on Scott. He was like, "Oh, you can smell it through the sock." Like he actually just felt like a character who wasn't just a cliche for a big guy, and this, for the most part, he was that fat guy. Oh, fat guy does funny things, and fat guy is fat and he farts and he's funny, kind of thing, which was too bad. Really was. They tried to do something with him, like being into fencing or him joining Todd when it comes to doing a joyride or something, but there's only so much that Mark could do. Um, there's a few other actors and actresses, but really that's the main cast. And the same dynamic, the same magic wasn't there because the cast in the first film was great. The cast in this is, like I said, a mixed bag. It's not terrible, but it's definitely a mixed bag. The cinematography by Jules Brenner, nothing special, nothing really that visually interesting, very flat, very television movie of the week look to the entire production. Uh the editing by like four different people is not impressive. Like one of them was Raja Gosnell, who apparently was hired last minute to punch up the boxing scenes, and they didn't really look that punched up. Yeah, the editing is rough. And it's crazy. I have all these different editors, and like the editing as a whole is just not that good. There's just so many scenes that just look very choppy, and it makes the film look like it's just jumbled together. The music by Mark Goldenberg, nothing memorable. Like I think the score by Miles Goodman in the first film is definitely better. I think there are bits of the score that might have been copied by Mark, if I remember correctly. But just like the first movie, this has a pretty good soundtrack. You got two great tracks by Oingo Boingo. You got Who Do You Want to Be Today? Who do you want to be? Who do you want to be today? Do you want to be just like someone on TV? You got that song. You got Outrageous by Oingo Boingo. You also have Real Life Send Me an Angel, which was in Rad and other movies. This was actually the first time I heard that song, was through this movie with the montage where Todd and Nikki are studying for the exam. Send me an angel. Send me an angel right now. Right now. Send me an angel. Like, yeah, I really like that song. And there's a couple other songs that were okay. There's like I think it was like a cover of Do You Love Me? The song, Do You Love Me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me now that I can dance? Da, da, watch me now. Like, yeah, that was a fun song, and yeah, it's a fun soundtrack. Not a great movie by any means, but it had a pretty solid soundtrack of fun songs, and definitely did help the film be a little bit more of an easy watch. But yeah, I mean, this is pretty bad. And it's crazy to me that it costs, like, I think the rumor is it costs 4 to 7 million. Where the fuck is that on the screen? I cannot believe for 1 second that this movie costs $4 to 7 million. This costs like, it seems like twice as much, if not quadruple as much as the first movie. The first movie, I don't even know if it was shot for, I think it was shot for maybe a million, maybe a couple million, but this was shot for like way more money, and it looks cheaper. Like, what? How the hell is that possible? One thing I will say looks a little bit better is the wolf suit, because it doesn't look as patchy, but that's not saying anything because the facial makeup looks worse. So like the suit looks better, but the facial makeup looks worse. Maybe it's because the same makeup effects artist didn't work on this. Uh, but yeah, there's just so many things about this that are just bad or lame or just completely and totally forgettable and cliched. So yeah, it's not a rant, but it's not a film that I'm gonna sit here and say that I like. I like some things about it, like the soundtrack and Jason Bateman and John Astin, and some scenes, not very many, but it's definitely not a film I'm going to watch again anytime soon. And it's a movie that I really would not recommend unless you are a diehard Teen Wolf fan or a diehard fan of Jason Bateman. Other than that, I think it's definitely something you can skip. And speaking of Teen Wolf, I'm surprised. Yeah, it didn't do as well as they would have hoped, but it still made a little bit of a profit. I guess if it cost only 4 million, although there's an estimate that it cost more than that in 7, then it made a little bit of a profit, probably made a decent amount on home video with rentals and things like that. So I'm surprised they didn't make a third one. Apparently they were going to, with Alyssa Milano of all people, and she was going to play hockey. She was going to be a female werewolf playing hockey. Part of me wants to see that movie just to see how big of a train wreck it would have been. But another part of me is like, yeah, I'm glad we didn't get that. I'm glad the Teen Wolf franchise ended here until, of course, you had the MTV a show. But honestly, the closest thing that has been to Teen Wolf since Teen Wolf 2 is Big Wolf on Campus, the show. That was I think they had like reruns at ABC Family and stuff like that. And I didn't mind that show. So honestly, I would say, like I said, unless you're the Jason Bateman super fan, just skip this all together and watch episodes of Big Wolf on Campus. I think you'll have a better time with that. But anyway, thanks for watching my review of Teen Wolf 2. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.